Hi, true crime friends. Welcome to another episode of Mountain Standard True Crime. I'm Michelle Carlson. The case that we're going to cover in this episode today occurred in West Valley City, Utah, where I lived for 15 years. So it kind of caught my eye. Please be aware that this episode contains some very disturbing content. I've read, watched, listened to hundreds, maybe thousands of true crime stories, and I had a hard time with this one. I do share another warning before the really gruesome information. The first case in this episode is also very sad and tragic, but just not as horrific and gruesome. And then just our standard housekeeping items. The information shared by Mountain Standard True Crime comes from publicly available sources and or official requests. Any opinions that we share on this channel are strictly that and are not meant to be interpreted as fact. Here we go. Sabrina Elder's grandfather, Alfred Ermer, said he knew his granddaughter was in trouble the first time he laid eyes on her boyfriend, Joseph Aberhansley. The grandpa said, "I tried to run him out of the yard, and unfortunately, it's too bad that his attempt failed, because on December 9th, 1998, he entered his grandmother Dodge's West Valley City, Utah home, paced up and down the hall several times, and then walked to the small living room where he shot and killed his girlfriend, 17-year-old Sabrina, who had just days before given birth to their son." Oberhansley's mother, Brenda Self, was holding her newborn grandson when she heard gunfire. She put the baby down and attempted to render first aid to Sabrina, who had been shot. Self laid across the girl and then was shot in the back and in the arm by her son. Oberhansley's teenage sister, who was also in the home at the time of the shootings, grabbed the baby and ran out of the room. They were both uninjured, though her brother had fired at his sister and missed. Grandma Dodge ran from the kitchen to the living room just in time to see Oberhansley place the gun below his chin and pull the trigger. Allegedly, he was convinced the new baby was not his, although they named him Joseph Aberhansley Jr., and he was angry because he felt that his mother and grandmother favored Sabrina over him. Sabrina and the baby were actually living with his grandmother at the time. Joseph was allegedly high on methamphetamine at the time of the shootings. Unfortunately, Oberhansley's mother, Brenda Self, who was shot twice by him, his grandmother Dodge, and other family members were hesitant to cooperate with the investigation. Oberhansley's defense attorney focused on the facts that his 17-year-old client was not only under the influence of methamphetamine at the time of the shootings, but he was also reeling with the suicide of his half-brother, followed by the suspicious overdose death of his father, leading to speculation about his state of mind during the murder. Oberhansley claimed to have received a traumatic brain injury as a result of his attempted suicide. He had been in a coma for 5 days after the attempt, but then recovered. Prosecutor Paul Parker said that based on all of this information, a murder conviction was unlikely. Oberhansley was initially charged with first-degree felony murder and attempted murder, a second-degree felony. On January 7, 2000, based on recommendations from prosecutors, Court Judge Atherton sentenced Oberhansley to 1 to 15 years on each count, but unfortunately ordered the sentences to run concurrently instead of consecutively. He would serve his time in the Utah State Prison. Oberhansley was also ordered to pay a $5,000 fine and $4,000 restitution. Are those fines and restitutions ever paid by persons that end up with long-term prison sentences? I honestly don't know, and I'm curious, so if anybody knows, please leave some information for me in the comments. At the sentencing, Sabrina Elder's grandfather, Alfred Ermer, the one who said he got a bad vibe from Oberhansley the first time he met him and tried to run him out of the yard, said, quote, "He's going to get out in 5 to 7 years to do it again. They didn't give us our day in court," end quote. Ermer had wanted a jury trial and said that prosecutors took the, quote, "cheapest way out," end quote. After passing a psychological exam, 12 years into his 15-year sentence, Oberhansley had his parole hearing before the Utah Board of Pardons and Parole. His mother testified in favor of his release and stated that she forgave him for shooting her, saying, quote, "I think the drugs had a lot to do with it," end quote. Sabrina Elder's family pleaded for him not to be released, with one of them saying a 15-year sentence wasn't enough to begin with. Another relative of Oberhansley said, "The primary objective of the board is to protect the public. The board also has a duty to safeguard the rights of the victims. That is what we are asking for," end quote. During the proceedings, the parole board asked Oberhansley if he suffered brain trauma when he shot himself. Oberhansley responded, "This is true." When the parole board asked him how the self-inflicted gunshot wound changed him, he said, "I feel that it's kind of really made me calm down, made me a lot more mellower. It made me, to a degree, I feel a bit more slow mentally." The Utah Board of Pardons and Parole released Oberhansley from the Utah State Prison in July 2012 after serving 12 years of his 15-year sentence. His parole was transferred to southern Indiana so that he could reside with his mother, who had relocated there. He was to be supervised through Interstate Commission for Adult Offender Supervision. Just 7 months later, Oberhansley would be arrested again. On March 10, 2013, he was arrested in Jeffersonville, Indiana, after allegedly choking out another patron in a bar and resisting arrest, all while naked. He was released on $1,000 bond. Oberhansley was charged on July 29th with strangulation and resisting law enforcement for that incident. His Indiana parole officer allegedly reported the incident to Utah authorities, but his parole was not revoked. The supervisor of Indiana Parole District 9 had also reported that Oberhansley had been attending required meetings and passed his drug tests. During this time, Oberhansley was frequenting Johnny D's bar in Jeffersonville. One of the bartenders there said he would come in alone and play darts. One night in March, a different night in March than the former incident, he met a woman in the bar and, according to witnesses, agreed to go home with her. In the early morning hours, a bartender at a local tavern, Slammers, called police to report a disturbance in the apartment that was above the bar. Police responded to the call to find a very distraught woman screaming when she answered the door. "He is killing my boyfriend." In the bathroom, officers found a naked Oberhansley choking a man who was barely conscious. What's with this guy being naked when he commits these crimes? Oberhansley had bloody knuckles and reportedly had to be tasered twice for officers to gain control of him. According to Oberhansley, he was the victim. He reported that the woman had invited him to her filthy apartment to have sex and that her boyfriend hit him over the head with a baseball bat so that they could rob him of his wallet, his iPod, and keys to his Chevy Camaro. Oberhansley was bleeding from the head, and the woman's shirt was on backwards and inside out, and her pants were undone. Despite these observations, Oberhansley was arrested and booked into jail on charges of aggravated battery, strangulation, and resisting arrest. News of this arrest never made it to Utah, to the Utah Board of Parole and Pardons, who could have issued a warrant and revoked his parole due to these charges. Apparently, Oberhansley's Indiana parole officer could not tell from the police report if he was the assailant or the victim, and he got no help from the prosecutor's office, despite repeated requests, so he did not report it to Utah. Oberhansley was introduced to Tammy Jo Blanton in the spring of 2014 by his mother, Brenda Self. The two quickly started dating, and he moved into her home at 329 Locust Street a short time later. The cute home had a covered wraparound porch with Adirondack chairs on the front and pretty flower baskets hanging in the front of the porch as well. I personally do not understand what she saw in Oberhansley. Tammy Jo was beautiful. In pictures of her, her eyes just sparkled. She was a little bit older than him, had a good job, and her own home. And to me, he looks like a little dweeb. I mean, that's just my opinion. According to her family, at first he seemed like a regular guy and even helped Tammy Jo build a deck on the back of her house. A friend of Tammy said that Tammy told her that Oberhansley had told Tammy Jo that he had a past, but that he was just a kid at the time and that he had changed. Unfortunately, Tammy Jo believed him and ended up falling in love with him. Her friends became concerned because she began isolating after becoming seriously with Oberhansley. She even added his name to her Facebook page, allowing him to monitor her social media activities, according to her friends. In July 2014, a report was due from Indiana to the Utah Department of Corrections. At that time, Oberhansley's parole officer did note the violent 2013 incident above the tavern, during which he choked a man until he was barely conscious. Unfortunately, the parole officer did not specify that charges had been filed, so Utah did not act on it. Just before midnight on July 21st, 2014, Oberhansley led police on a slow speed pursuit into Kentucky. That again landed him in jail. Indiana authorities informed Utah of this latest arrest on July 23rd, which unfortunately was the day his probation ended in Utah. So their hands were tied. I can't believe that. The bad luck. Good luck for him. Bad luck for Tammy Jo. At some point during this time, Clark County authorities became aware of his violent past. Chief Deputy Prosecutor Mull allegedly requested a higher bond for the strangulation charge. The bond was set for $25,000 full cash only by Judge Weber on July 30th. But for some reason, the next day, Deputy Clark County Prosecutor Benjamin Reed, who was working without Mull's approval, I don't even know how that is allowed, negotiated a bond reduction with Niles Driscoll, Oberhansley's acting attorney. The bond was slashed to a mere $5,000 from $25,000, and only 10% of the $5,000 had to be paid for him to walk out of jail. $500. Unfortunately, Tammy Jo Barton paid it, and he was released. Had bond been capped at its initial $25,000 full cash requirement, perhaps she would not have been able or willing to pay that much money. Tammy Jo's friends became increasingly worried about her after this last incident and searched Oberhansley thoroughly on the internet. They found out about him murdering his girlfriend, who was also the mother of his newborn son, and that he had also shot his mom. They told Tammy Jo about the Utah incidents, and she eventually became frightened of him. Tammy Jo broke up with Oberhansley in early September. On September 11th at 2:50 a.m., Tammy Jo Blanton called 911 and reported that her ex-boyfriend was trying to break into her home. Upon the arrival of officers, Oberhansley agreed to leave after claiming he lived at the residence and was upset that the locks had been changed. His ID, however, showed a different address. Oberhansley's mother, Brenda Self, the one he had shot back in Utah, awoke to him in her bedroom around 3:30 a.m. that morning. He complained to her that Tammy Jo had changed the locks on her home, and then, according to a police affidavit, he was also upset about his finances and his job. And after they chatted for a little while, he got in his car and left. When Tammy Jo failed to show up for her billing and coding job at Zermed, which was across the Ohio River in Louisville, Kentucky, later that morning, coworkers became worried and called her cell phone. A man claiming to be her brother answered the phone and said that she had gone away to care for her sick father. The friend did not believe the man answering Brenda's phone was her brother, the affidavit states. She then called Jeffersonville police and requested that they go do a welfare check on Tammy Jo at her home. Officers responded to her house shortly after 10 a.m. and found her vehicle in the driveway and signs of forced entry at her back door. When they knocked on the door, Oberhansley met them and identified himself as Joe, but said he did not have identification with him. He told officers that Tammy Jo was not at home and he did not know where she was. Okay, this is when I'm going to issue another warning. We're about to cover some extremely disturbing and gruesome information. If you're sensitive to violence, gore, or you're at all squeamish, you might not want to continue with this story. Like I said earlier, I've read and watched and listened to hundreds, maybe possibly even thousands of true crime stories, and this one has been tough for me. So again, consider if you want to continue watching and or listening. It is absolutely not appropriate for children to hear this information. Okay, here we go. The officers ordered Oberhansley outside to the front of Tammy Jo's home, where they saw fresh injuries to his right hand. When they searched him for weapons, they found a folding knife in his pocket that had blood and hair on it. While her colleagues detained Oberhansley, Jefferson police officer Connie Viers, could be Veers, not sure, Viers, went inside to check on Tammy Jo. She confirmed that the back door had been broken into and found blood on several surfaces in the house. There was blood everywhere, she testified at Oberhansley's trial. The bathroom door had also been forced open, the affidavit states. Viers went back outside after noticing a large amount of blood in the bathroom, along with a large vinyl camping tent draped over the bathtub. Accompanied by other officers, she returned to the home to secure the scene. Captain Mike Pavey went into the bathroom, where he found Tammy Jo Blanton dead in the bathtub. The front of the victim's skull appeared to have been crushed, and brain tissue appeared scattered around the bathtub. Oberhansley was taken into custody for questioning, and a search warrant was executed at the scene. A deputy coroner examined Tammy Jo's body and found injuries to her face, her head, her neck, and her chest. Most of the cuts were deep, including a full thickness cut that spanned almost the entirety of her neck. A large section of the front of her skull was removed, according to the affidavit. A large portion of the victim's brain was missing. An examination of the cuts to Tammy Jo Blanton's chest showed that her heart was also missing from her body. Parts of her brain, along with part of the skull, were found in the bathtub and in a trash can. A plate with what appeared to be skull bone and blood was found in the kitchen, according to the document. A skillet and a pair of tongs with blood on the handles were found on top of the stove. The cooking surface of the skillet was blackened with a void in the middle where the cooked material had been removed. It turns my stomach. It's just so disgusting. And her poor family to have to hear these details. I can't even imagine somebody doing this to somebody I loved. In the front bedroom of the home, police found several trash bags containing Oberhansley's belongings. One of Tammy Jo's friends had told detectives he'd talked to her the night before about her relationship troubles and suggested that she pack up Oberhansley's things and put them on the porch for him to pick up. When investigators questioned Oberhansley, he initially claimed not to know Tammy Jo had been killed. Eventually, he admitted to breaking into her house and into the bathroom where she had locked herself away after he broke in. It's too bad she didn't have a gun. She could have potentially taken him out and saved her own life. According to court documents, Oberhansley admitted to killing her by stabbing her in the head, neck, and body, then cutting her open with an electric saw, then removed part of her brain and ate it raw, and then cooked another part of it and ate it. It's just so barbaric. Oh, God. I can't even stand the smell of blood. So I don't know how anyone could do this. He also said he cut out a part of her heart and a lung and ate those too. Oh my God. Like, how freaking disgusting and evil. This guy is one sick you know what. The autopsy revealed that Tammy Jo Blanton died of multiple sharp force trauma to the head, neck, and torso. From Oberhansley's booking photo, it's obvious that Tammy Jo put up one hell of a fight trying to defend herself against this monster. He was beat up. Tammy Jo had allegedly confided in friends that Oberhansley had held her captive the weekend before her death and raped her multiple times. Text messages between the two were discovered and read in part, with Tammy Jo texting Oberhansley, "You can choose to be in denial about what happened Saturday into Sunday. I won't be in denial. No one, and I mean no one, gets to terrify me like you did on Sunday. I will never forget it as long as I live." Oberhansley responded by asking Tammy Jo to, quote, "come to him," end quote. What the hell? Like she's really going to want to go to him so that she can be abused by him all over again? I mean, that just shows how deranged this dude is. Tammy Jo responded by telling him to get his things out of her home before she went to the police. She threatened to file a rape and criminal confinement charge. She said, quote, "I don't want to involve the police, but if you leave me no choice, that is what I will have to do," end quote. Personally, I really, really wish, and I'm sure so do her loved ones, that she had immediately reported what he had done to her and gotten a protective order against him. Perhaps with his violent criminal record in the area, he would have been locked up and this never would have happened. Tammy Jo stayed with a friend the Monday and Tuesday nights before her murder, going home on Wednesday only after her dad had changed out all of the locks. She had texted a friend on September 10th that she'd locked all of her windows and placed a chair under the knob of her back door. She said, quote, "At the end of the day, I'm taking my life back," end quote. She said, "I worked too hard to get here. No one will take me down," in capital letters. Tammy Jo was killed and mutilated Thursday morning. This is so sad and tragic. I mean, she was ready to kick him down the road and take her life back when she was robbed of the opportunity to do that in absolutely horrible ways. And this might be a little bit cruel, but I don't care. I sure hope his mother regrets introducing him. She knew all too well of her son's violent nature and past. I'm not saying you would want your son to be alone for the rest of his life, but I don't think I would be introducing my son with tendencies like that to anyone because I wouldn't want that on my conscience if something did happen. In October 2017, a judge found Oberhansley incompetent to stand trial and ordered him held at the Logansport State Hospital. He complained during court appearances that his attorneys were, quote, "trying to control his mind," end quote. In July 18, he was determined to have regained competency following treatment. Oberhansley's first trial ended in a mistrial in August 2019 after a witness for the prosecution mentioned alleged drug use by Oberhansley. Jurors were not supposed to hear testimony about either drug use or Oberhansley's prior criminal history because those details could have prejudiced the panel against him. Personally, I strongly believe that if a defendant in a criminal case has a criminal history, it should be allowed in court. The best predictor of future behavior is past behavior. But what do I know? His full trial finally began on September 11, 2020, 6 years to the day since the horrific murder of Tammy Jo Blanton. I feel so bad that her loved ones had to wait that long to see this monster go on trial. It's just, it had to have been just torture. Oberhansley had maintained his innocence in the murder, telling reporters that two black men killed 46-year-old Tammy Jo inside her home. Oberhansley maintained that defense during testimony as Clark County Prosecutor Jeremy Mull questioned him over what happened that night and why the two unidentified men would stab Tammy Jo dozens of times and simply only hurt him and, leave him to live. Doesn't make sense. Oberhansley also said on the stand that he didn't know who had consumed some of Blanton's organs after her death. More than a dozen people testified over the course of the trial, including friends and co-workers of Tammy Jo, a forensic expert, and Jeffersonville police officers who had responded to the scene after the murder and earlier that morning when he had initially tried to break in before the murder. One witness testified that Blanton hesitated to call police after the alleged weekend rape and confinement because she didn't want to send him back to prison. I would not have given a shit if that had happened to me. It's so unfortunate because, again, perhaps he could have been locked up and able to brutally murder her. She obviously had a very, very big heart, too big. Prosecutor Mull pushed for the jury to convict Oberhansley on each count, saying, "She suffered so many indignities that night. She was terrified, she was stabbed, she was dismembered, she was eaten, and she was raped. And the justice for each of those acts of indignities is important if it is proven. It's what justice demands," end quote. Joseph Albert Oberhansley was found guilty of killing Tammy Jo Blanton and consuming parts of her body, but not guilty of rape. Not that it would have made a difference in his sentence, the time of his sentence, but why not find him guilty of that if they found him guilty on everything else? I don't know. Oberhansley's attorneys were set to use an insanity defense in the case until he told them not to. The prosecution agreed and dropped the death penalty option if the defense didn't bring up his mental health issues. Okay, those are kind of important, but again, what do I know? He was ordered to life without the possibility of parole, thank God. He also was sentenced to 6 years on the burglary charge. The sentences will run concurrently. Oberhansley continued to claim his innocence as he walked into and exited the Clark County courtroom. He said, quote, "I am 100% not guilty of these false charges against me. I am disappointed by the decision. I did not kill Tammy Blanton. It was 2 black guys." Okay. After the judge announced the sentence, Tammy Jo's mother and sister-in-law addressed Oberhansley for the first time inside the courtroom. Her sister-in-law told him he deserves to sit in a cell for the rest of his life. She said, quote, "Tammy Jo couldn't fix you. No one can. You are a monster. Rot in hell." Oberhansley responded to her, saying he loved Tammy and what happened to her was horrible, but that he did not kill her. Tammy Jo's mother looked him in the eyes and told him he had taken so much from so many people and he didn't care. Both women called him evil and told him he took the life of someone they loved. Prosecutor Jeremy Mull says he hopes that was the start of the healing process for the family. It was just very poignant watching the family finally have an opportunity to have a say, finally be able to address him and just express to him their feelings about him and what he did, Mull said. The system has just swung so far in the wrong direction, making the proceedings about the defendant's rights and not about the justice that is due to the victim and the family. So as the prosecutor, I really like the point in time when justice accrues to the family members, to the victim, and we get to talk about justice and not just the rights of the defendant. That happened today. End quote by Mull. Joseph Oberhansley's attorneys filed an appeal for his life sentence to the Indiana Supreme Court in May 2022. The 49-page appeal filed with the Indiana Court of Appeals said that the sentence of life without parole is not appropriate for Oberhansley because he suffers from a, quote, profound mental health disorder and was detached from reality when the crime occurred, end quote. Thankfully, the Indiana Supreme Court upheld his conviction. My heart goes out to Tammy Jo Blanton's loved ones. She was a beautiful woman, and I'm sure she's dearly missed. Sadly, she's another victim of domestic violence that ultimately ended in her murder. This happens all too often. Tammy Jo was a beautiful and vibrant woman who did not deserve to be taken at the hands of a violent, sadistic cannibal murderer. A vigil for Tammy Jo Blanton was held to raise awareness of domestic violence. Preachers from a nearby church led the prayers. They stood on the front steps of her home behind a cross that had been placed in the lawn in the front yard. There were hymns sung and kind words said about Tammy. Her friends spoke of the love she had for her family and friends and their love for her. One preacher also spoke about domestic violence and made a plea for those living in fear to get help. He said, quote, "Domestic violence isn't something that just happens to people. It can be happening in the lives of people you know who are close to you," end quote. Reverend Don Summerfield of the First Presbyterian Church was the one who said that. The preacher also said that he'd been a part of several other vigils for murder victims, and most of them, he said, were related to cases of domestic violence. Tammy Jo's closest friends organized a group to help fight domestic violence and to bring those issues to light. I will share the domestic violence hotline information at the end of this episode. Her obituary reads, Tammy Jo Harbin Blanton, 46, passed away Thursday, September 11th, 2014 at her home. She worked in billing and coding at Zymed. Tammy was a 1986 graduate of Jeffersonville High School. She was a native of Jefferson, Indiana. She is survived by her father, Darrell E. Harbin of Jeffersonville, Indiana, mother, Linda D. Meeks Harbin of Louisville, Kentucky, brothers Tim E. Harbin of Charlestown, Indiana, and his partner, Charlene, Jason A. Harbin of Jeffersonville, Indiana, grandmother, Norma J. Meeks of Duggar, Indiana, 3 nephews, Joshua, Jacob, and Gunnar. Tammy was preceded in death by her brother, Darren A. Harbin. Expressions of sympathy may be made to the Center for Women and Families. Here I go with my opinion again. I have an issue with her obituary. I don't mean to sound critical, but personally, I'm a blunt person though. I tell it like it is. Some people don't like it, but hey, I am who I am. I would have said that her life was taken from her. Not that she simply died. Not the same at all. This was a hard one. If you or someone you know is being emotionally, physically, or sexually abused, call 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233. Again, it's 1-800-799-SAFE, which is 7233 for help. Or you can text START, S-T-A-R-T, to 88788. If you are in a life-threatening situation, call 911 immediately. You can also visit the website, thehotline.org. All of these are free, confidential, and available 24/7. The website does issue the following security alert. Internet usage can be monitored and is impossible to erase completely. If you're concerned your internet usage might be monitored, call us at 1-800-799-SAFE. Learn more about digital security and remember to clear your browser history after visiting this website. Click the red X in the upper right corner or escape button on your keyboard twice at any time to leave thehotline.org immediately. It's sad that they have to issue that warning, but I'm so glad that they do because so many people aren't aware of the trail that is left in our computers and mobile devices. Please contact 911 if you feel like you're in immediate danger or a life-threatening situation. Please take advantage of these free resources if you are in need of help. If you haven't yet, please give this episode a thumbs up and subscribe to our YouTube channel and follow us on Spotify. It really helps us out a lot. Until next time, please be aware of your surroundings, stay safe, and take care of yourselves.